Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to IIM Bangalore BBA program in Digital Business and Entrepreneurship, Nova Unplugged
Recording in
2025.
progress.
We are thrilled to have you all today here. To start with, we are honored to have Professor Rishikesha T. Krishnan, Director of IIM Bangalore. His primary areas of expertise are strategy and innovation. He has been visiting scholars at prestigious institutions like Center of Advanced Study in India, University of Pennsylvania, and Indian School of Business, Hyderabad. He held Jamuna Raghavan Chair in Entrepreneurship at IIM Bangalore from 2007 to 10. He is a prolific writer on strategy and innovation with over 200 publications. His notable works include Jugaad to Systematic Innovation, The Challenge for India, and 8-Step Innovation from Going Jugaad to Excellence, which won the Best Book Award from 2013 and 14 for the Indian Society of Training and Development. Let's give a big round of applause to welcome Professor Rishikesha T. Krishnan for a session.
Okay, first, good to see all of you. So, of course, we did meet some of you earlier in the fest of IIM Bangalore, but many of you I know are coming here for the first time. So, first, a warm welcome to all of you. We have, of course, been actively engaging with you online in all the courses. So, I'm glad to see that good number of you are very strongly engaged with the academic curriculum, and please continue to do so. But I thought this morning, rather than just give you some general talk, I will share something specific with you. So one of the areas I have been working on in recent time is the area of how to scale up startups, particularly in the digital arena. So that's, of course, something very closely related to what all of you are studying in your curriculum. So I thought I'll just share with you some of the insights I have got so far in my research. I'm working towards writing a book, which I hope will come out either later this year or early next year. When the book is out, I'll share the details with you. But now what I'm going to do now is just give you a kind of sneak preview of what are all the things we are talking about in the book, okay? So this is basically the main topic. It's about building and scaling a viable business. And the key question I'm going to try and address today is how do you build a scalable and growth-oriented startup, and how do you scale it successfully, okay? So that's the core question. And I'm going to suggest to you that you could actually try to do this by design and in a very strategic way if you pay attention to certain key factors. And that's what I'm going to try and cover in the presentation to all of you today. So these are some of the questions I will try to answer. The first question is, I'm just starting up, but I don't want to start a small company. Essentially, I want to build a really big, impactful company. So what should I think about right at the beginning? When is the right time that I should focus on scaling and growth? What challenges am I likely to face in scaling, once I have achieved some kind of product market fit? Is product market fit a kind of uniform thing? Because in India, and I'm going to just suggest to you that there's a lot of heterogeneity in markets. So particularly if you're in the consumer space, there may not be a single product market fit. So how do you deal with the heterogeneity or variation in product market fit across markets? And even if I have achieved product market fit, should I rush into expanding capacity and scale, or should I go slowly, or what should I do? I mean, what is the process I should follow in moving from what appears to be product market fit to a larger scale? And finally, how does the speed and trajectory of scaling that I follow depend on the type of business I'm in? So these are the 5-6 questions I'm hoping to address in the next half an hour. Okay, so the first one is a very straightforward question. What should I worry about in the early stages? So I know many of you have been thinking of your own startup. I know some of you are already into your own startups. So obviously, there are a lot of questions you're asking when you start your business. So the point I'm going to focus on today is, suppose I really want to build something which is large and impactful, what should I be thinking about when I start? So the first point I really want to underline here is that you'll be better off if you choose an area or theme which has high growth potential. So what do we mean by have high growth potential? Let's just take an example. Sometimes examples make things easier. So you look at the area of insurance. What you'll see here is that if you look at these two graphs on the right hand side, in both life insurance and general insurance, Indian market is a relatively young market. the penetration of insurance in India in both these different types of insurance is relatively low compared to global benchmarks. So clearly, if you're looking at an industry like insurance, there's a lot of opportunity, and that's what Digit Insurance and many other young insurance companies looked at. So you can see some of the numbers here. And globally, we also have a lot of evidence that as the economy grows, the demand for insurance grows. So if you know the whole India story, right? So if India is to become Vikasit Bharat by 2047, what growth rate do we require? What rate does the economy have to grow every year? Yeah, typically upwards of 8%. Less than 8%, you are not going to reach that number. Okay? So if India is going to grow at 8 to 10% for more than the next 20 years, clearly the demand for insurance is also going to grow at a very significant pace. There's also another interesting thing. A lot of studies suggest that even the existing customers are not getting the kind of products they require in the insurance market. That's another big opportunity opening up. And the cool thing about it is that digital technology today is allowing you to meet many of those gaps in a much better way. So this just kind of gives you an idea that there are multiple factors you can look at to determine whether what you are trying to address has the potential to grow fast. The second important factor I would really underline here, beyond looking at an industry which has high growth potential, is to remember that entrepreneurship is not easy. Those of you who are already into startups would have experienced it by now. There are lots of obstacles and roadblocks which will come in the way. How are you going to overcome them? You will overcome them only if you have a lot of passion. And of course, it will also help if you have expertise. Because if you have some unique idea or knowledge that enables you to overcome those obstacles, you will be much better placed compared to someone else who doesn't have that kind of expertise. So I'm just taking this example of Digit Insurance again. This gentleman, Kamesh Goyal, is the founder of Digit Insurance. And you can see that he brought some very unique expertise to the table. For example, he had been CEO of both a general insurance and a life insurance company. He had 30 years experience in the insurance industry. And he had a very strong desire to make insurance simple using technology. And he realized that, as I just mentioned a couple of minutes ago, the technological developments we are seeing can enable you to iron out many of the challenges in the insurance industry. So of course, you might say, look, I'm only 18 or 19 or 20, and how will I have such expertise? So you don't necessarily have to have everything yourself. You could build it with partners. You might also have had some unique experiences even in your life so far, which might translate into some unique business opportunities. So just keep looking at how you can sharpen your expertise to enable yourself to overcome those obstacles. And of course, this could even happen with youngsters. You look at a company like Razorpay. Okay, so the two founders of Razorpay, Harshil and Shashank, they were, of course, much younger than somebody like Kamesh Goyal. And interestingly, their first business was not what they are doing today. It's not actually in having a payments platform. What they really started with is trying to outsource donations. And while they were trying to outsource donations and create a donation platform, they realized that the whole process of getting payments was all screwed up. And that's when they decided, hey, look, this seems to be a better problem to solve. Let's jump into that, and then we can look at the other problem later. So that's why they decided to identify this problem, which is democratizing payments for small businesses. They needed a platform for an easy, inexpensive, and secure way for companies to take payments online. So that's essentially the kind of way they went about identifying their opportunity. Now, the third thing you might want to keep in mind, and of course, everybody in entrepreneurship talks about this, but it's really helpful is if you can build a strong team. Building a strong team allows you to bring the complementary abilities to fill in the gaps which you as an individual may not have. Just remember, a company like Infosys had 6 or 7 founders at the beginning. Each one of them brought something distinctive to the table. Mr. Narayan Murthy brought in his experience, his yearning for good governance. Nandan Nilekani came in with a strong sales and marketing background. There were other partners of theirs who were willing to do the back-end work. They all complemented each other very well. So you can just see some more recent examples. You look at a company like Flipkart, you must have all heard of Sachin and Binny Bansal. Very different personalities. In fact, if you read books or any articles about Flipkart, you'll see that they are very unlike each other. Sachin Bansal is the big dreamer. He's the guy who's really obsessed with tech. Binny is the guy who's really looking at putting in place processes, execution, operations, supply chain management. You can see that's very complementary, right? Because one guy is looking at the big picture, one person is actually very interested in making it happen. If you only think about big picture, your business is not likely to grow, right? You need somebody who's going to take care of all the tough work which needs to be done. You can look at another company which is in the pharmacy space, which is PharmEasy. PharmEasy actually came about from the merger of two founding teams. So you'll see that they have a really wide variety of experience. Somebody is a doctor, few of them are MBAs, somebody comes with a computer background, somebody comes with a finance background, and so on. And this has enabled them to look at M&As and a lot of other complex mechanisms to grow their business. Similarly, you can look at a company like Big Basket. Big Basket, of course, again was with older founders, people who already had a lot of experience. But just look at them, like Hari Menon was in charge of buying and merchandising. Ramesh came in with looking at infrastructure and warehouses. Vipul Parekh, who's IMB alum, heads marketing and finance, and so on. So each one of them is bringing a separate, distinctive interest, and they're finally pooling it all together to make the business work. And you can just think, right, Big Basket will require all these skills. You'll require merchandising, you require marketing, of course you require finance, you require very good supply chain capability. So you need different people who bring expertise. Of course, you could also hire them. It's not always necessary that the founders have to bring in all the skills, but if the founders have the skills, it really helps. Another fourth important point is to understand the entire value chain well and identify some opportunities for differentiation. Just realize that finally, at the end of the day, what really makes a company successful and distinctive is its ability to do something in a different and better way than others. So you have to identify where is it that I can make that difference. So let's take an example once again. Let's look at Digit Insurance. One of the pain points which Kamesh Goyal realized quite early is that when a car has an accident and when the owner wants to make an insurance claim, the first thing he needs to do is to get the car surveyed. There needs to be a representative of the insurance company who comes and sees what damage has happened. Without that, the insurance company won't even process the claim. So he realized that this is a big bottleneck in the whole insurance process. And he said, is there some way I can actually address that? Can I make this process faster? Similarly, he also found that the agents, that is the people who are intermediaries in the insurance business, they had their own problems. They sometimes have to customize a policy for a particular customer, but the company would not respond to them quickly. They don't have authority to do it on their own. The company has to authorize it, but the company would take a long time to authorize, and they would lose business in the meantime. So these were the first two problems he identified very early, that if I can use technology to solve these problems, maybe I'll be able to create a differentiator for my company that others do not actually have. So specifically, you could look at this simple framework. Wherever you see pain, wave, and waste, that's probably a good opportunity for you to look for innovation and differentiation. What do we mean by pain? Pain is, are the existing stakeholders finding some difficulty or challenge in addressing that particular problem? That's the pain point. Second one is wave. Is there some trend which is happening at a larger scale which we should worry about? And third one is waste. Wherever you see waste of time, money, effort, that's certainly an area you need to look at. And you can see in the Digit Insurance case, the pain point was the delays felt by end customers and channel partners. Another pain point was the lack of transparency, and of course all of this led to lack of peace of mind. The wave was that insurance was becoming more widespread as the economy grew. And the waste, of course, you can see people are waiting, their car is all locked up, they're waiting for the surveyor to come, and they're getting more and more frustrated. But just remember one thing, when you innovate, you don't want to innovate just for the sake of innovation, not just because you're going to do something different, but at the end of the day, you must create value for somebody in the value chain. Sometimes, you get so carried away by your idea that you're just trying to make it more and more fancy, but maybe that doesn't really deliver value to the customer. So just be careful about that. So you can just go back to the Digit Insurance example. As I was telling you, the big problem was a delay in pre-inspection. The solution was a mobile phone-based solution where the person who was insured, himself or herself, could actually take pictures with the phone and send them to the company. And what was the outcome? The turnaround time was reduced from 7 days to 7 minutes. Now that's valuable, right? Because that's where the customer is benefiting by having a much shorter time in the whole insurance claim processing. And for the agents, they were also finding it difficult to get a quick turnaround from the insurance company. So what do instead? They created a self-service portal with user options, and they were able to reduce the turnaround time from 1 day to almost, in a few minutes, they were able to give a response. So these are all clear examples of how you create value for the customer through innovation and, of course, using technology to make that happen. Now, of course, once you innovate, that may not be the end of the story. Because finally, you also have to be able to deliver that on a consistent basis. And most companies, startups struggle with this because you often need to create infrastructure to deliver this innovation. Let's look at some examples. Let's look at Flipkart. This is a very old example. Flipkart often claims that it was the first to offer cash on delivery. But a more accurate description of Flipkart is probably to say that they were the first to make cash on delivery an integral part of their process. I think there were companies even before that who tried. Most of them failed. And what Flipkart realized is if you had to do cash on delivery at that time, you needed a delivery company who was willing to handle cash. At that time, the courier companies were not willing to do it. Finally, they set up their own logistics company to make this happen. Remember, this is at a time when there was no UPI, none of the things that made payment easy were available at that time. That's how Flipkart went about it. Similarly, Flipkart did a lot of very simple things to make even things like online payment work. At that time, payment gateways were very slow. And sometimes one gateway would work faster than the other. So they created their own software to kind of quickly identify which gateway is working the best and quickly shift the customer to that gateway. Remember, all this has to be done in milliseconds, right? Because the customer is already online. Just remember also that you've got to figure out what is the capital need of your business and then choose the business accordingly. Some businesses are inherently very capital intensive. For example, you think of something like the airline business. Some people have even tried to start helicopter businesses. Some guys tried to start a helicopter service in Bangalore just to enable people from Electronic City to go to the airport. Even a business like that can be quite capital intensive because you need to lease aircraft, you need to have other infrastructure, and by the time you get returns on that, it can take a long time. So our friend Kamesh Goyal, he also realized this problem, but he did something smart. I don't know how many of you have heard of Prem Vatsa. Prem Vatsa is a IIT Madras alum, but he's one of the most successful entrepreneurs in Canada. He runs a company called Fairfax Holdings, and Fairfax Holdings is the lead investor in Digit Insurance. Incidentally, if any of you came through Bangalore Airport, today Bangalore Airport is, the largest shareholder is Fairfax. So Mr. Prem Vatsa actually, in a way, owns Bangalore Airport as well. So he is actually an investor in multiple companies in India. But clearly, since Kamesh Goyal didn't have the money, he got a good partner who could make sure that he had the minimum amount. You need 100 crores minimum capital to be in the insurance business. He had an anchor investor who could make that happen. So most of you guys don't think of going into the insurance business because you may not be able to get that 100 crores. You may not be able to line up Prem Vatsa, but there are a lot of other opportunities which I'm sure are open. Just look out for them. Okay, sometimes you might also find pan-industry challenges which you can address. That's often quite rare. That happens only if you have a lot of experience. Prem Vatsa was able to do that. He was able to address some of the trust deficit issues. I won't go into that because that's a little more complex. What I would also suggest is that establish a firm foundation in one line of business before rushing into other lines. Many startups get distracted. They start thinking, okay, I'll do this also, I'll do that also, why can't I do third thing? But all that increases complexity and makes it even more difficult for you to survive. So Digit Insurance in spite of all the capital they had, they also realized maybe they should focus. So as a general insurance company, while they did offer multiple lines of insurance, they realized that motor vehicle insurance is the one where they have a really good differentiator. So initially they focused largely on that. They made their reputation in that before they went on to other streams of general insurance. How many of you know what the word disintermediation means? Put your hand up if you know what it means. 1, 2, not many, okay. 2, 3, okay, fine, good. So disintermediation basically refers to any kind of a chain in which there are multiple people in the middle who are all taking commissions or taking away part of the value. And sometimes you can release value by simply removing those middlemen in the entire chain. Okay? So you see that in many industries, right? There will be multiple middlemen at various stages and each one of them is taking 10%, 15% commission. It really adds up at the end. So disintermediation is often a way of releasing value. One company which did that very well was Dell. You might have heard about Dell and read about it. Dell was the first company which made direct-to-consumer sale of computers a very reliable business. They cut out all the retailers and everybody in between. Therefore, they were able to offer a much better deal to the customers. But what you might find is that disintermediation is not always a good idea. And when is disintermediation a bad idea? When the partners are actually providing value. If the partners are not providing any value, then it's okay to kind of push them out. But if they are providing value, you have to be careful. In fact, one of the things Digit Insurance realized is that the channel partners, if they are empowered, could actually provide even more value. You remember the example I gave you, right? The intermediaries and partners got a portal in which they could solve their problems also easily. So they felt more empowered and they were happy to work with Digit Insurance. One of the key things for any business, and particularly a business that has to scale, is customer centricity. So what we are talking about customer centricity is to say that you really have to make the customer at the center of whatever you do. And you must have a value proposition that makes sense to the customer. What is a value proposition? It's a statement that explains the unique benefits of a product or service to its customers. And it's the main reason why a customer chooses your product rather than a competitor's one. So the more you can sharpen your value proposition, in a way, that's the way you sharpen your customer centricity. So when Big Basket started, for example, they realized at that time that they were trying to be a substitute for somebody who was going to a store. So they realized if they are to be an effective substitute, they need to be able to provide whatever the customer will get by going to the store. So they defined their value proposition as meeting the entire grocery needs of a family without necessitating any visit to a physical store. Now, this might not be so valid or relevant today in a time of quick commerce, but you remember when people were shifting from going to the Kirana store to buying online, this was a very important value proposition to provide. And if your value proposition is combined with a sizable addressable market, that's really the best thing to happen. Because remember, at the end of the day, if you want your business to grow, if there isn't a sizable addressable market, you're really going to have a very limited arena in which to play. Now, the other thing you want to do, and I think this is something that almost all entrepreneurship gurus emphasize, is you also want to build a strong organizational culture that's aligned with your company's mission. You might have heard of this book. It's a very old book. I would still encourage you to read it if you can get hold of it. It's called Built to Last. It was one of the first management classics, bestsellers. And what it really said was the companies which were long-lasting and the companies which really outlived their competitors were the ones who had a set of very deep core values. In fact, that's what was the main distinctive factor of long-lasting companies. So essentially, startup founders have a big role to play because they are the ones who shape the culture of the company. So you might think it's not important, but there's a lot of research which shows that the early imprinting in a company, the early values that are emphasized have a big role to play in how the company evolves and grows over time. So you can see this quote from Tony C., the founder of Zappos. We believe it's really important to come up with the core values that you can commit to. And by commit, we mean that you're willing to hire and fire based on them. So that's the kind of focus you need to have when you're looking at what values to choose. Okay, when is the right time to focus on scaling or growth? Typically, anybody would tell you it's after you've achieved product market fit. Product market fit is one of those very, very hoary concepts in entrepreneurship, which everybody says is important, but is not that easy to achieve, and sometimes it's not even very easy to identify. So product market fit essentially says that there's a set of customers for whom your product or service is making a lot of sense. So you can acquire them at a reasonable cost. The cost of acquisition is much less than the lifetime value the customer will provide to you. And the customer retention is also high. The existing customers are satisfied enough with your product or service that they continue to remain with you. So these are the two key things: customer acquisition as well as customer retention. So you want to be able to repeatedly acquire customers for a lower cost than what they are worth to you. That's really the key test. And while this is a very nice concept in theory, what you find in practice is that there are really a lot of challenges in scaling based on product market fit. The first one is clearly that product market fit in one market may not mean product market fit in another market, simply because there are demographic, geographical, and regional variations. So for example, as K. Ganesh says, sometimes even in India, it almost seems as though different markets are like different countries. It's difficult, therefore, to replicate from one region to another. And challenges can be on both sides. They could either be on the supply side or they could be on the demand side. He gave me a very cute example when he talked to me. So you might know that one of the companies that Ganesh started was a company called Tutor Vista. Tutor Vista had a very simple business. They were trying to provide tutoring services to students globally. For example, students in the US who could not afford tutors in the US were getting online tutoring through Tutor Vista. So you can see what he said. What he's saying here. Tutor Vista was easily able to recruit high-quality tutors in Bangalore. Many well-educated individuals who did not want to teach in a college were willing to teach online for the amount that Tutor Vista paid. But they found that when they tried to replicate this model in some other places like Delhi, for example, they found that there was a very different dynamic there. Some of the tutors were in turn subcontracting to others, trying to create their own network. The quality was falling. Tutor Vista was not able to supervise this. And as a result, quality declined. So essentially, this is more a supply side rather than a demand side issue. He thought the supply side problem was addressed, but actually it wasn't addressed. So almost in every market they had to relook at how to go about doing this. And it's not only that. As you become more successful, sometimes your cost of acquisition can also keep going up. So this is an interesting example, once again, from digital marketing from Tutor Vista. So digital marketing, initially when they were hiring algebra teachers, Google was charging them about 30 cents per click. But as time went by and as they started getting more and more people, Google also started raising the rates for the marketing, digital marketing. By the end, it was costing them $6 per click, and that was not financially viable anymore. Excuse me. So you can see that Google also learns, and then its algorithms, as to quote him, started squeezing him. So that was not a very, so you can see while product market fit looks very simple, it's actually much more complex when you try to achieve it in practice. Okay, apart from product market fit heterogeneity, what are some of the other issues you want to look at? You might want to look at the whole question of reconciling market size and scaling, because what you will see is that what might appear to be a very huge market, when you dig deeper, it may not be that huge after all. A good example is the cafe market. You can see in India today, right? There's so many players here, right? There's Third Wave, there's Coffee Day, there's Chai Point. There have many new players coming in all the time. But what you see actually when you look very closely is that the number of people who can really afford to go and have a coffee in any one of these cafes is actually quite small and largely restricted to the big metros. In fact, a company like Coffee Day, which expanded all over the country, finally had to pull back its boundaries because they found there's really not a big enough market in many small towns in India. So at aggregate level, it looks very good. You know, India has 1.4 billion population. People will tell you 200 million middle class. All of that looks very good, but when you actually dig deep, you find a model like this is not very scalable. And another important question is, if I have achieved product market fit, should I rush into scaling? So one of the interesting ideas which has come about in recent years is you need to be careful. There's an exploration stage where you're learning about PMF. There's an exploitation stage where you're scaling, but maybe there's a stage in between when you need to do extrapolation. What is extrapolation? Extrapolation is where you actually experiment with some of these scaling models to see whether they actually exist or not and what kind of tweaking is required. So increasingly, the wisdom is that maybe you don't want to rush, maybe you want to be a bit careful, do this exploration and exploitation stages, of course, but also remember there's this extrapolation stage in between and you need to pay more attention to that. Oh, and basically what we are saying is that you should sharpen and tweak your value proposition and business model during the extrapolation stage. Let me give you just one example for this and then I'll close. So there's a startup called Whiz Club. Whiz Club was started in 2018 with the objective of building aptitude and technology acumen in school students. It basically focuses on 3 dimensions, as you can see there. Initially, their model was to do this whole thing physically. They targeted large apartment complexes and preschools and had a product called Higher Order Thinking Skills, where one instructor worked with 5 or 6 students. Of course, you can imagine that once COVID came, this model was no longer workable. So it went online in 2020. In 2022, post-COVID, of course, they had the whole question of, okay, now how do we scale it up? And they had a challenge that lead generation was difficult, customer acquisition was a challenge. What they realized is maybe this model doesn't work. Maybe they need to go to a B2C model. So instead, they started trying to target students through schools. So they set up a B2B sales engine to essentially address the school market. They did a lot of things within that. I won't go into all those details. Finally, they were able to generate 50,000 qualified leads per month. Then they increased the sales team. They also realized operations needed to be tweaked in order to enhance the delivery performance and the experience. So they brought in a retainer-based instructor model, brought in more student feedback, started engaging the parents themselves, brought in engagement managers and so on. So this is all part of the whole extrapolation process to identify, okay, yeah, the market exists, but I can't just scale it up just like that. How do I tweak the model to make it work better? Now, of course, they have new offerings as well. And finally, they have emerged with a new differentiated program that enables delivery of their core value proposition. So just realize that this extrapolation stage is a very important stage where you really figure out what is a practical way of scaling it up, how do you sharpen the value proposition, and how do you also acquire the customers that will make this happen. Okay, the last thing I mentioned, and I'm going to stop in about a minute, is that does the speed and trajectory really depend on the business I'm in? Yes, it does. If you're a hyper-local business like Big Basket or Potia, you probably have to recreate the business in every geography. There's some amount of replicability, so you could have a template which you try to repeat in different cities, but there's a certain amount of adaptation you'll also require. On the other hand, if you're in a jewelry business like Bluestone, probably you don't need so much tweaking. You can have 1 or 2 centralized manufacturing facilities. You can replicate the model across the country. So just remember, depending on the type of product you're in, are you in a winner-take-all business or a business which requires a lot more adaptation, customization, etc.? Depending on that, the whole business of what you will need to do to replicate can vary quite a bit. So essentially, the wider environment matters. If it's product-led growth, it's probably simpler. Otherwise, it's probably going to need a lot more complexity. And you'll also have to use playbooks like Uber, Ola, and Swiggy have to do. But remember, you still might have to customize about 30%, even if you're using a playbook model. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop here. That's fine. I'll just close. Okay, so I think let me just try and sum up. So what I was just trying to share with all of you is that if your dream is to finally build a scalable business, you need to think about many elements of this right at the beginning. You need to figure out, are you really solving a problem in a way that creates value for the customer? Do you have a real differentiator? Can you have some expertise or something distinctive to you which other startups won't have? Will you be able to put together a team where the team members can complement each other? Will you be able to also figure out a good way of scaling up the business through the extrapolation phase? And as you can see, the extrapolation phase itself involves a lot of experimentation as you try to scale up the model. So just keep all of these in mind. But underlying all of this is just 2 or 3 things which I would think are very important. Are you really addressing a customer's problem? Do you really have a clear value proposition? Is that value proposition really integrated into the business model you have? Do you have a consistent and reliable way of delivering that value proposition? And do you have the infrastructure and organization at the back which can deliver that? So just keep these points in mind. I think if you can do that, you're at least some part of the way towards building a scalable business. Okay, thank you. Sorry, Suresh, I overshot a little bit. But yeah, sure. Yeah.
There. No. We like plant.
Yeah, go ahead.
So how do you suggest to grasp on the pivotal change of a trend or a wave other than being observant of the market?
See, the wave, by the way, could be in many things. The wave is not necessarily on the consumer side alone. Wave could be in terms of social changes. It could be in the case of technological change. It could be major demographic changes. But yeah, I think the key thing is to have that ability to keep looking at data and, by the way, qualitative changes as well, link them together and then try and identify some of the dominant things that are happening.
Sir, my doubt is about in product market fit, sometimes people say the product is way ahead of its time. Like the market is not yet ready for a product like this. Do you believe in something like that?
It is true, but often the reason, part of it can be behavioral, but part of it can also be the fact that some of the complementary things you require to make that product successful may not be in place yet. You look at some of the guys who brought in EVs too early. Because the supportive infrastructure in terms of charging stations and so on were not there. Like, I forget the name of that company. There was a company in Israel. No, Reva is here, but in Israel there was a company which had tried to bring in EVs about 10 years back. Better Place. Finally, it became almost prohibitively expensive for them to create a charging network. And there were no others who were interested because it was not yet seen as a business which was going to take off. So I think one of the big challenges in timing is to make sure that the complementary assets or infrastructure are also available. Of course, as you rightly said, sometimes it's a behavioral issue as well. Behavioral things, sometimes you can, through marketing and so on, you can try to change them, but the complementary assets and infra are very difficult to overcome. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. What I wanted to ask is 2 questions. First is that since most of us have changed to online social mingling, and we are stuck in our echo chamber. So how do we find people who are different from us online? And the second question is, how do you know, like, what is the best culture for your company? Like, you know, we could have different companies in the same sector who have very different company cultures. So how do you know what's right for your company? Thank you.
Okay, first question, I have a very simple answer. Get out of your echo chamber. Okay? Like you've all come here, right? I think you made a sensible decision. Yeah, of course, the classes are online, but you said, okay, there's this great opportunity to meet everybody, and you all showed up here. So, just a tip for the next time, you still have chance even today, but the next time you go to an event like this, set yourself a personal objective. Say, during that 1 or 2 days I'm going to be there, I'm going to try and identify at least 5 people who could be my potential co-founders. Doesn't mean you have to work with them. It just means looking out for them, talking to them, identifying them, so that by the time you leave, you actually have in your mind the possibility of such a group. Okay, the second thing you said about how do I know what is the best culture? Okay, there are 2 aspects to that. I think the first aspect is you can't fake culture. I don't think it's easy. So if you don't honestly and genuinely believe in something, I don't think you're going to make it happen in your startup. So if you look back, you look at anything, you look at Infosys, you look at any of those examples I gave you, most of those folks had strong beliefs. And those beliefs got translated into the culture of the company. Sometimes companies do create a culture based on a lot of discussion. There's a company called Mindtree, you might know, IT services company, which got acquired by L&T. The original founders of that company tried to build the culture through a very consultative process with their first 100 employees. But even then, I would suspect that ultimately the core beliefs of a few of them would have dominated. By and large, it's better if the culture you have is, in a way, aligned with the value proposition you are providing. Take an example of Apple. So clearly, Apple's value proposition is to provide you a out-of-the-world user experience. Okay? If that's the case, your internal culture had better match that. Then you're going to have a very bureaucratic culture internally, because then you're never going to be able to deliver that experience. So keep that in mind. Yeah, last 2 questions, I think, and then we'll stop.
Hello, sir.
Oh, sorry, where's the mic? Yeah.
So you talked about a long-lasting company should have a certain core values, and those can be individual for a company, right? They can be separated. But what do you think are the basic core values every company should have so that it becomes long-lasting or it is more successful?
So what the build to last guys found is that the exact values themselves didn't matter that much as their identification of those values and sticking to them. So, but I would just echo what I told her, that if your values are completely out of sync with the kind of business or market you're trying to create, then you'll have trouble anyway. But assuming that alignment is there, then I think some variation is fine, for sure. Okay, last 1 or 2 questions.
Good morning, Professor.
Yeah.
My question was, I have this ideology that at the stage of life I am right now, I should initially set up a traditional business, such as an import-export or something like that, and scale it up to a level where it's stable and making passive income for me, so that I can focus on building a startup. What's your view on this? What should I do? Should I get into a startup right now, or try to make a startup right now, or I should do what I think is right?
Yeah, so first of all, Trump may ruin your import-export business. Huh? So be careful. That's the first point I would make. So I would put it slightly differently. I think there is a benefit in building core business skills, wherever you're building that. You build it in the import-export business, you build it in somebody else's company, you build it wherever you have an opportunity. Just the ability to identify opportunities, build a team, deliver, run a business, that is a useful skill to have. So but I'm only a little worried about starting this import-export business. Starting any business is not an easy thing. So I'm just worried that by the time you do that import-export business, in the with the goal of trying to create that steady cash flow, you might be exhausted by that itself. And I don't know then whether you will be able to go on to the next phase. I would just suggest to you instead, look for some slightly lower cost way of building business skills. And then you could always jump into your startup. That would be better in my view. And I don't think you'll always be able to fund your business from some other cash flows that you have. Ultimately, you will have to find other ways of funding the business, either through investors or through friends and family or whatever it is. So I'm not sure that model will necessarily work. In fact, what often happens is people get so tied to their cash flows, they don't do anything else. Good example is Indian IT services industry. You go and look at all those guys, you know them, right? TCS, Infosys, Wipro, HCL, etc. They have huge cash flow. Most of the time they're sitting on literally billions of dollars in the bank. But that doesn't necessarily mean they are willing to invest it in very creative and innovative things, right? Because then they get worried, what if that doesn't succeed? How will I show returns to the shareholder? They get stuck in all sorts of other traps. So maybe you should just keep free of those. Don't get into that import-export business. Instead, just pick up skills and sharpen them. Okay, last question.
Okay.
Okay, last guy. Who was you already asked.
I already asked
no,
a
no,
question,
no,
so I'll let him ask.
No more. You already asked one.
Can I pass the mic to him?
Yeah, pass
because
it,
he
pass
has
it.
a question.
Yeah, just pass it.
So my question requires some context, right? When you look at businesses in India, our Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal recently made the claim that businesses that target this India tier ones, that is a smaller subset of the population, and creates value and entrenchment in only certain customer segments. Indian businesses and startups find it difficult to scale into like these, maybe India 2, India 3 markets. And it's sort of a question between, you said, obviously go for the total addressable market and something that's viable. But how do you balance those scalability issues with creating a bigger social impact in a market like India, where most of, let's say, the total addressable market isn't ready for the sort of value propositions that very creative or innovative businesses have?
See, at the end of the day, my friend, you have to make some choices. Okay, I don't think you can't have a business that meets the needs of everyone. Okay, so I teach strategy, right? One of the things we tell strategy students is you can't be all things to all people at all times. It's a tongue twister, but just try saying it. You can't be all things to all people at all times, right? That's basically saying you have to choose somewhere. What product am I going to make? Which market am I going to serve? Okay, so while I agree with the minister at a high level that we want more businesses who can address bigger markets, not all businesses are necessarily expandable in that way. You will have to completely reconceptualize. I mean, it's already happening. I gave you the example of cafe business, right? There are new players in the tea and coffee business, particularly the coffee business, who are now trying to rejig the whole value proposition. I was reading some article in some online portal the other day. Unfortunately, I don't remember the names of the companies who are trying to create a 30 rupee, 40 rupee kind of a coffee instead of a 300 rupee coffee of Starbucks. Okay? And they are trying to do that through a lot of interesting methods to try and get into the same markets which you just mentioned. But that usually requires a very different way of looking at things. See, I think the point which Mr. Goyal made is important in another way. If you just try to replicate what has been done elsewhere, you are likely to get caught in a high-cost model. See, if you try to replicate Starbucks in India, which in a way is what everybody is doing, right? You are going to be caught in the model of Starbucks. So maybe Starbucks will sell a 300 rupee coffee, maybe you will be able to sell it for 250. But you won't be able to bring it further down. The only way you can really sell a low-price coffee is you have to completely rethink the whole thing from scratch. So that's where I think what Mr. Goyal was saying is you need to have more creative thinking. You need to look at things in a different way. Sometimes that might involve technology. So he was also complaining. He was asking where are the deep tech startups. So sometimes you might require unique technological solutions to make that happen. So you will have to look at things without preconceived notions. I think that's really the core idea which he was trying to communicate. Okay, good guys. Nice. Once again, good to see all of you. And sorry, some minor criticism. Guys, don't turn up late. Yeah? Once you come here, you should turn up on time. At least 1/3 of you came after 9:45. Not a good thing. Please make sure you're on time in future. These are all very basic things in business. If you want to be a good entrepreneur, you have to show up for your meeting on time. Otherwise, you may not get the business. So please, just try to build some of those things into what you do. Have a great day here today. Stay in touch. Do well in the program. And we look forward to also seeing how you guys grow and succeed in the future. All the best.
Thank you, sir, for that insightful and thought-provoking session. Now I request Professor Suresh to present a token of appreciation to the director. Moving forward, we have Professor Vasanthi Srinivasan, Chairperson of Digital Learning Foundation. She is a professor in organizational behavior and human resource management area. At IIM Bangalore, she teaches the core course of managing people and performance in organizations and offers an elective in human resource management. She has designed and delivered leadership development and career management sessions in executive education programs. She holds a fellow program in management from IIM Bangalore. Please welcome Professor Vasanthi Srinivasan for her session, Skills for the Future.
Thanks so much. It's such a pleasure to be here because for many of us sitting here, right, this is what we would call a dream program. It's a dream program because when you are an institution that celebrated its 50th year, offering physical face-to-face programs, and I must confess that it is indeed even more special because, like they introduced, this is also my alma mater. So to that extent, to see after all this while a program that is truly digital, and that we have 250 plus students in this room who are there going through this program that for us about 8 years ago may have been a dream. Okay? So I think the first thing I want to say is that it takes time to make a dream happen, but when that dream happens, it's here. Thank you. Second, and very important, is the fact that in the last few months that you've been on this program, just think for a minute, what skills have you acquired just by being on the program? Anyone just shoot out, just call out. Networking. Oh, very good. What else? Time management. Brilliant. What else? Communication, right? What else? Thinking out of the box. Excellent. What else? Creativity. Absolutely. What else? Multitasking. Absolutely. Yeah? Self-accountability. Teamwork. Any others? Schedules, just maintaining those schedules, right? They're crazy. Yeah? Discipline. You need some personal discipline even if you're doing the last minute studying, right? We all know that, and your analytics clearly at the back end tells me that, boss. Okay, so let's not even go anywhere there, okay? Look at the submissions, every one of them, okay? Then we'll come to, why am I saying this? Because the heart of being an effective professional is self-management. If you can manage yourself right, you can manage most of the things, right? So to some extent, I want you to just remember that you're acquiring skills every day. Are we mindful of the skills that we are acquiring? is something to think about. Because many times, when we acquire something, if we are not mindful, we don't know whether we have it or not. Okay? So, what I'm going to do in this short session with you, because I believe you're going to see me maybe in the next term. So to that extent, I'm going to keep this session really short. And the focus of the session is to get you to think, saying, what are the skills for the future? Okay? I'm blending, obviously, my own interest, my own work over the last 25, 30 years, and also combining it, what am I seeing happening in the environment? And therefore, what are the implications when you're going through a program like this? And I'm going to I have just 6 slides, okay? So as we walk through that, we'll be able to see. This is a report that got released just a few months ago. And this is a very interesting and an important report because in some ways it tells you globally what's happening. And my own experience has been that anything that the global reports talk about in 2020 becomes reality for India by 2025 to 2027. And the reason I brought the 2025 is because that will be the reality as you step out to work in organizations or create your enterprises. Okay. What does this report say? The report basically says that some things are going to be relentless and it's going to continue to happen. First is technology changes, and we haven't seen the end of it. We haven't seen the end of it. Okay? There are going to be more tools, there are going to be more methodologies, techniques. So to even believe that you can keep up with a tool or a technology is foolish, and therefore continuous learning is a must. Okay? The idea that, oh, I've finished my degree and done with life, nonsense. Your degree does not tell you that you have learned anything. Learning comes the first day you start working. Okay? So to that extent, the notion that I've acquired degrees is disappearing. And yours is a great one because I don't know how many of you will continue into your second year and how many of you will actually want a degree in the third year. Right? You have an option to exit as certificate. You have an option to exit at diploma, come back 2 years later. I mean, all of that is to make sure that you're not just picking certificates up and stacking them in your life. It's to be able to ask this question, am I actually learning? How did I apply? What am I going to do? Second, even more interesting, given the current geopolitical realities as we stand here, one of the important questions, and I think Rishi very nicely told one of the persons who asked the question, saying we don't know what happens on the import-export with Trump, and that is the truth. And today, as we speak, what's happening around, geopolitical relations are changing, and therefore, to that extent, the kind of jobs that are likely to come in will require a higher degree of understanding of the context. Third, economic uncertainty will continue, and we are beginning to see that quite extensively, primarily because inequality is increasing across the world, and you actually look at the GDP of nations and the kind of heterogeneity. Any which way you look at the kind of economic uncertainty that's happening, it's going to continue, and it's not going to go away very quickly. Demographic shifts, everybody is talking about demographic dividend for India, that we have a large number of young people, but the important question is not so much having people, but the question is what do you do with the intellectual capital that you have? Yeah? And, thank you. Now, and the last but not the least is this whole idea of climate change and issues that are related to sustainability. And we are able to see the implications. So clearly, there is a green transition underway. What kind of jobs do they create? What kind of challenges do they pose for organizations? And for each one of you sitting in this room, if there isn't a bit of an understanding on all of these 5, right, we have a problem. Okay? So the report, and I've given you all the references with the hope that when we upload the slides, you'll be able to kind of take a look at them. Okay? So it's interesting that if this is the context in which each one of you are going to at least begin your careers, then what are the set of 21st century skills that are needed? Okay. Anyway, you're going to have all of these slides, but what is important for you to be able to see is that as technology enhances, what are we discovering? Core skills are becoming even more important. Math is becoming even more important as computers deepen. English is becoming even more important as digital marketing, copywriting, all of those are becoming even more important. So the paradox of today is that the core capabilities, literacies and fluencies and all of that we were talking about are becoming even more important given that we are moving into a world that is largely going to be enabled by technology. But what is it that is coming study after study, and we are beginning to see this across the board in industry. And I'm particularly going to focus on jobs, and I'm not just looking at large organizations, because large organizations are not going to add too many people over the next 25 years. Okay? They will grow, but the numbers that they are going to add is not significant. The people who are actually going to add numbers for India are actually small and medium enterprises. They're going to be family businesses. And that's where the next phase of jobs is actually going to come from. Yeah? And I'm not talking just about startups, I'm talking about the entire spectrum of what we are looking at in terms of jobs. So, this is, again, a recent report on what is the skill gap among graduates. And this possibly is the most important slide of the presentation and for you to look at in the program. The India Graduate Skill Index 25 basically says that these are the 5 areas that are most important for companies, and these are the 5 areas where our graduates are the weakest. Okay? So that kind of set me thinking. And therefore, what I did is just bring a little bit on what is it that each one of you can do as you're going through this program, as you're kind of looking at learning in other contexts, because many of you are enrolled in other places where you're going through your studies. So how should you actually look at this entire space of skills for the future? I'm going to start with critical thinking. Today, if you ask me, the number one skill that is needed when you have information overload, and I see this happening with the interns who join us, I see this happening with young employees who come in, you don't know the difference between data, information, and insight. What I get is a wonderful slide deck of information that has no sense. And I'm giving this feedback because nobody else is going to give it to you. Yeah? Critical thinking is the ability to synthesize, the ability to understand the core of what it is that is being said from multiple perspectives. Okay? And WhatsApp University is the most unhelpful one of the lot, because you are perpetuating things that one person often does not even write but forwards, and you continue to forward mindlessly. And what do we know from research? That if you're not able to apply critical thinking, your brain cells die. So to that extent, are you able to discern when information is given to you? And therefore, a whole set of questions starting from media and what is circulated to the content that is provided to you. Are there alternate perspectives? Are there people presenting other views? So core and central, yeah, to critical thinking. Are we discussing amongst ourselves, and are there perspectives that I don't agree with? If so, the next question is, why is that person saying what they are saying? And if you're not able to do that, how are you going to go into an organization and listen to somebody who's actually providing constructive feedback? So you now begin to see why companies are saying that this is a missing capability. Critical thinking is a foundation skill. Is a foundation skill. No company is going to teach you this. So which is why if some of you go for interviews and you get rejected, please come back and think about it rather than saying, oh, these companies don't hire, they have all networks through which they hire, poor me, I come from a fourth year college. Nonsense. Those are all excuses to justify your incompetence. So I want you to kind of reflect, because what is the capability I'm missing? Second one, written communication. My God, it is unbelievable. Have you ever seen the mails that you write more deliberately? Yeah, see, you are. What is that? Does it even exist in the dictionary? Yeah, maybe for your colloquial conversations makes a great deal of sense. But imagine you're sending your CV with, okay? And if you think that's funny, I'll tell you, really, we get mails like that. Can you please consider me for your interview? See you. See you where? You're not going to see me forever. Delete. Yeah? So just be mindful, because remember that every mail you write is a presentation of yourself, And the person who is receiving the mail is making an assessment of you based on that mail that you send, and believe you me, you don't even have a second chance to correct it. So, communication, and the irony is all jobs today that are non-technical, working with technology, require communication. Do you want to create a blog post? Is it social media? Are you building a flyer? Are you actually looking at how a website, what should it contain? All the way up to, are you writing a manual for a user? Or are you actually building a story? It doesn't matter where you are. Written communication is central. And therefore, ChatGPT is embellishing. It's to polish. It's not to write. Okay? So, my request to you is, don't lose your core human capabilities, because when you lose that, technology cannot bring it. You asked for core values and beliefs for company. What are your core capabilities? A core capability is the ability to compose, whether it's music or whether it's mail. And composing as a capability, when you lose and outsource it to technology, you've really lost the human distinctiveness that you have. Can ChatGPT do better than you? Of course it can, yeah. Because it actually learned from hundreds of people like you who posted. Okay? But does it reflect? I mean, for me, ChatGPT never reflects me. ChatGPT cannot reflect you. All that it can do is to make sure that it sounds nice. Yeah? So, I've just given a URL because most of you may not have had sessions like this. So to that extent, just in case you're wondering where, she's coming and giving all this advice and throwing stuff at you. No, boss, there's nothing in this presentation that is throwing stuff at you. It's just giving you enough data so that as digital literate community, it's your responsibility to go back and check if there's something that's actually given to you. Creativity. Apart from having done that course, curiosity, right? Nobody can teach curiosity. Just think about it, yeah? You can go through your life without being curious. But the fact of the matter is, when does curiosity surface? When does creativity surface? Both of them surface. Do you have a hobby? And maybe good to ask yourself. Not the kind of story that you tell in an interviews where you say, yeah, I used to play cricket when I was a 7-year-old and that was my hobby and it's no longer my hobby. No, we are actually talking about what are the hobbies that you pursue as you're here. Do you do a Sudoku or a crossword? Because you don't have a choice but to actually start thinking, and thinking very differently from the way you're doing every day. is there a way for me to look at the same problem from different perspectives? And I think you're beginning to see that on the course as you listen to different faculty. As you're going through the course, you're saying, wow, that's also right, but that was also right, and that's what that faculty said, and I was thinking about it, and it relates to this. As you're doing that, you're also making those synaptic connections in the brain. What are we now able to see? That people who write algorithms, who have wider synaptic connections, tend to be able to visualize the end outcome better than just pure coders. So it's quite interesting to see that this combination is what seems to be getting valued. And last but not the least, and I will come back and emphasize on that, read. When I say read, I hope that it includes all kinds of reading, which is not just what you get on the media, but just look at different newspapers that are putting out digitally content. You're looking at fiction, non-fiction. You're looking at books. You're looking at the whole spectrum when you're looking at reading. So I'm just going to go back to this and close, saying that if these are the skills, as you kind of look at where you are today, just quickly take stock. Which are the skills that you're really good at? I give you a minute, just look at it. What are the competencies in the middle that I'm really good at? And here you have character and qualities. Competencies can be taught, but character qualities are a little more difficult. They have to be learned, which means they require investment from your side, yeah? And deep reflection. On that note, I'm going to pause and take questions.
Ma'am, in this current generation where there has been a lot of debates on high employer turnover or low company loyalty, as a student, what do you think? Should we specialize one place, or do we keep upgrading ourselves? And what's your take on that?
I think now it's unambiguous that it doesn't matter in which context you are. The first few years are about depth. Okay? In the absence of depth, you cannot get breadth. You can only appreciate breadth when you have depth in one discipline. Okay? So therefore, for long, people said, T career, depth and breadth. Okay? So which is why now when I look at technology mediating jobs, I'm now discovering that the T career is even more important in technology, even though it was not visualized in the context of technology organizations. I'm beginning to see that if you're interested in reading a little bit more, Davenport, okay? Davenport has a piece where he talks about what are the careers of the future and how should people look at their careers. And he basically talks about 5 ways in which people can look at their careers. And he talks about step up, step side, step down, step in. And in each of them, there is an element of expertise that is needed, which is deep expertise. So even if it is in a technology enabled, I think without depth, you can't go very far. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. No, it's not.
Good morning, ma'am. My question was that in skills, for example, like critical thinking, there is no way to measure how good you are at it, right? Like, for example, if I have to compare and if I have to know, like if I want to improve on critical thinking or communication, for example, what do you think should be the right metrics for that?
Good question. Good question. See, when we want to do self-development, there are only 2 ways to do it. One is compare yourself with yourself when you were 6 months ago. In all the subjects, all the places where it's technical, functional skills, you know it, right? When you began how you were to 3 months into the course, how you are in the way you think, very easy for you to be able to see it yourself. Okay. But there is another way when you're looking at behavioral qualities like this, which is to be able to say, around you, who's the best person who has that capability? Okay? In your peer group, who has that? Okay. Now, it's very interesting, but for each one of us, right, our peer group have certain capabilities that we know is important for us. And if you just sit back and look at it, often you yourself will be able to rank yourself on it, yeah, against your peers. Not so much in terms of I want to be like that, as much as to be able to see how far can I work upon myself to be able to be there. Yeah? So one of the things in this process, don't forget, is that you should not compare your weakness with somebody's strength. And that's a mistake all of us do, right? We compare our weakness with somebody else's strength. Actually, we have to compare our strengths vis-a-vis their strengths and look at our weakness in the context of that. Yeah? So that's the only thing to bear in mind, because otherwise it can get very frustrating. That's all. Okay, thanks. Yes. Okay.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Ma'am, how important do you think is negotiations, and how can we as a student in getting involved in the program develop the negotiation as a skill?
Yeah.
And how to be a good negotiator?
See, many times what happens is negotiation often in early stages of your career will actually be around 3 areas. First is negotiating around your work and what you're doing, okay? For that, you need to know your work, your job, whatever it is that you're going in clearly. The second one is, who are you negotiating with? What is the context in which you're negotiating? If you're walking into a room to negotiate, and I'll give you some hilarious examples that we get, right? Students come in to negotiate just before the exam to postpone the exam date, which was announced 3 months early. I mean, are you going to even get to influence that? Unless there is some, holiday or something declared by the government because of which we have to reschedule, okay? Or it could be that significant number of students are preoccupied in. So if you come to negotiate like that, it's a no-win, boss. Huh? So context of negotiation. So everybody takes a chance. Let's try and negotiate. But is that negotiation? No. Okay. Negotiating comes in only when something is so valuable to you and is as valuable to the other person. Unless you have a context like that, right, it's one-sided anyway. So my suggestion to you in terms of negotiation would be that maybe to just reflect a little bit and see where are you not able to negotiate effectively. And why are you not able to do that? Because that will give you a very good sense, right, of why you're not able to do. Yeah? Often one of the areas even in the classroom that students ask us is negotiating with parents. Yeah, comes up almost every time in our classes because it's seen as a negotiation. Of course it's a negotiation, but the question is, in that context, when do you succeed, when do you fail? When does the other person succeed, fail? If you apply that a little bit, then you can figure out whether it's skill, because today negotiation has become a skill. And when something is a skill, right, it's like a tool. Then in which case, you can, I mean, like if it's a knife in the hand of a barber, chef and a surgeon and a murderer, same knife, right? Used very differently in different contexts. So please don't treat negotiation as a tool. It's not very helpful. But looking at negotiation as a behavior that I would like to acquire, that will possibly give you more insights. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
My question is an extension to her question. So you said you should assess someone who's close to you is good at that skill. But if I'm not able to assess myself, how will I be able to assess them on that particular skill if I don't know the metrics and all?
Okay, good. Yeah, good question. So simple, when you're looking at assessing yourself on anything, on critical thinking, let's assume, or collaboration, okay? Hello, my friend, you can't ask me a question and talk to your neighbor, no? Yeah, please. So I think there are 2-3 things that I would like to leave you with. First is that it doesn't matter where you start your assessment. Okay, it doesn't matter. A lot of times people think they are good at something till they are able to see someone who's better than them. Okay, so don't worry too much where you're starting. Wherever you're starting, and if I say I'm really good at it, right, you will find somebody. When you're watching television, I don't know, I watch a lot of interviews on TV, right? I'm always so fascinated because there's somebody out there who's able to think and articulate so much better than what I can do. So it doesn't have to be somebody in my circle. It can be people I see on television. It can be attending an event like this and seeing somebody. So when you're looking at a behavioral change, it doesn't matter where you assess yourself because there will always be someone who's better than you. The question is, are you looking for someone better? Are you looking for someone who's better than you? If you're looking, you'll always find that somebody is better than you. So don't worry where you start in assessment. You want to give yourself 5, give. There'll always be someone who's at 8. There'll be somebody who's at 10. So it's a moving scale. It's not a static scale. Is that helpful? Yeah, you have a hand up. Okay. Yeah.
Good morning, ma'am. Ma'am, like, what could be the reasons that we as students lack in essential skills like communication and written communication, as you stated?
Yeah. So often what employers are saying is that while you know a lot because you're preparing for the exam, we rarely think about what is it that organizations are likely to require from me. Okay? So one of the simple things when you're doing, let us say you're helping in a cultural festival in college. Okay? Have you needed to write mail to somebody? If you have done that, many of you will know that 4 or 5 of you will sit down to compose a mail. Yeah? Or they will assign it to one person who is capable of writing it well. Oh, you have good English, yeah. You will be able to communicate, so please you do. Yeah? So a lot of places where you can acquire skills like that, we end up either giving it to the person who's already good at it, and so that person does not acquire skills what they are not good at. And therefore, many times, essential skills at work we don't acquire. Second one, how often do we take opportunities for presenting? Because you want better grades, the person who presents will always be the person who's a good presenter. So even if we have opportunities, it appears that we don't take them. And when you come into the work, those are the skills that are needed because you've got to stand up and make a presentation, you've got to persuade somebody, you've got to write a mail to someone, and none of this you are equipped with. And when you go and ask your manager or your buddy saying, please help me, the person is saying, what's wrong with you? You don't know how to compose a mail. No, I know how to compose a mail, but I'm not confident. Huh? So organizations are reporting these kind of issues. The other one that organizations are telling us very clearly is that, like college, right? You don't share notes, I'm going to study by myself and I will be the best. You go into work, boss, there's nothing you can do individually. Right? And that orientation, I will finish my work, I will then, yeah, doesn't work. Because managers are saying, why have you not said when you have completed and asked for more work? We don't go out and ask for more work in our colleges, right? Oh, work done, let's finish, yeah? So you can see, right, the attitudes and behaviors from campus go into the corporate. And that worked very well for you on the campus, but everything that works well on the campus is exactly what will not work for you in the workplace. And that's why some of these become important. Okay? Thank you. On that note, have a great time, all the very best, and enjoy yourself. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your valuable insights on skills of the future. I request Professor Suresh to present a token of appreciation. Yes, yes.